Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? It is Monday, February 12th, 2018. Phew, got that out correctly. Just want to make sure we got the date right for once. Man, hey, happy Monday. It's Infrastructure Week. Believe it or not. The guy who says he's president of the United States, Donald Trump, he insists it's Infrastructure Week again, which is amazing that he can do that without laughing. But who knows what he's doing behind his iPhone or whatever he uses to tweet. He uses an Android, whatever. I don't know. It's the, I guess it's probably about I don't know. I mean, literally probably about the 6th time they've attempted to announce it as Infrastructure Week. This time, I think there's actually supposed to be a plan of some kind that's being unveiled. I don't know if it's any different from the other hints we've gotten about the plans that were coming out. Probably pretty much the same thing. And I don't know then why they weren't able to release it before. The tradition with Infrastructure Week, of course, is that you begin the week on Monday by announcing that it's Infrastructure Week, and then by Wednesday, some horrible scandal has erased all of that. And really, honestly, it's usually by about, I don't know, noon on Monday that he's tweeted something dumb or something else comes up. But I don't think we've made it all the way through an Infrastructure Week yet. I think the closest they ever came was the time that they brought those trucks and fire trucks and stuff to the White House lawn, and he sat in them and honked the horn and pretended he was driving a big truck and made vroom vroom noises. I'm not sure what that really had to do with infrastructure. That was transportation, and transportation infrastructure is a big part of what we think of as infrastructure, but still, it was a one-off. I don't know. So everybody recognizes it. Everybody's laughing their heads off, or whatever parts of them are coming off when they laugh. At the prospect of it being Infrastructure Week again. It's really a rather amazing thing to witness. Okay. So what else is going on? Lots of chatter this morning about a number of things. Scott Pruitt is in the news, the EPA administrator, again for his extravagant travel spending. Infrastructure Week, you see. And I mean, I think it's stuff we've known about him for a long time. He's a profligate spender, although I think last time we were making fun of the fact that he had built at the cost of, I don't know, several tens of thousands of dollars, had built himself like the soundproof booth at the EPA so that something, no one really knows what kind of state secrets he was discussing, but it was always, I guess, supposed by observers that he was, handling phone calls about running for governor in his home state and didn't want people to hear about that. Today, the Washington Post is hitting him thanks to, or I guess yesterday evening, we're all just waking up to it now, Juliet Alperin and Brady Dennis with the news that he's spending hand over fist on his travel. Apparently travels around the country when not traveling on military jets, which is not really what we usually think of for the EPA administrator. He is flying everywhere first class, which might be the assumption people make about how a cabinet secretary travels. But predecessors to Mr. Pruitt, of course, did not because, it was a very highly visible way of wasting money. But he decides he's got to fly first class. And apparently he's got some, or the people at the EPA, the spokespeople, have some sort of line about it being because of security concerns, although no one can figure out how first class is considerably more or less, actually, secure than coach. But, I mean, I guess he probably means I don't want to be near as many smelly people because they're so dangerous. I don't know. But travels in first class all the time. Travels, of course, with a large group of aides, which, as we recall from earlier reports, includes something like a dozen, like personal bodyguards, much bigger security presence and the first around-the-clock security presence, I think, for an EPA administrator. Dangerous times and all, but still EPA. Weird here, I see a bullet put together by Daniel Dale a bulleted list of some of these things from the Washington Post report that also includes the bullet point that he only flies Delta, which is, I don't know. I'd love to know what the explanation for that is, unless he just something simple like he owns shares in Delta Airlines, something like that. And, of course, stays in high-end hotels, like our friend Chris Christie always did. Stayed in the Four Seasons back in his days as a U.S. attorney. So we'll check in on some of that and get the details of that. Greg Dworkin, of course, has a raft O stories prepared for us as always. Oh, I see some alerts here from our previous three-way conversations that include Armando. So I wonder is Armando making comments along the way? Yes, he's got some stuff too. So make contributions coming in from everywhere. Let's begin with Greg Dworkin now that our lovely music has alerted us to his presence. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Okay. There's it sounded like emergency 911 dispatch in the background there, but it's probably me.
Yeah, I was trying to turn the phone off while I was turning the Skype call on, and because it doesn't automatically cut out my iTunes version of it, so I'm listening on my instead.
Okay.
As you know, there's a lot of different ways to listen to Kagro in the morning, both by podcast and live. And my preferred version for all of this time has actually been Stitcher on my iPhone. It's just the easiest way I could find it.
Yes.
But there's like 50 different other ways these days.
Yes, there is. And the exciting new way that I don't know whether anybody's using because there's no statistics available, Radio Public, which is an interesting new entrant into the market and which claims to be interested in paying podcast creators for every 1,000 downloads or listens on their system. So it's a great way, or theoretically a good way, to help support the show. I don't know whether it really works or not because I have no details on it. But there it is.
If that's the case, then I want to raise.
Well, all right.
At the end of this segment, instead of saying thanks, I want you to say thanks, Greg. I mean, that'll
check.
like double the amount of money that I get for this.
That's true. Yes, I saw another story fly by on Twitter this morning about how podcasters are making a living, and so I thought I'd better bookmark
There's an interesting concept.
Like making a what now? Honestly, that sounds like a great idea. I know a lot of people who like to live.
Yeah, I know. But, I'll never get over the idea that somebody would actually want to pay you to like call your friends and talk to them. I
cannot figure it out. But then again, constantly surprised by Snuggies and Big Mouth Billy Bass too.
This is true. So it's a funny thing. You mentioned something about Infrastructure Week.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that funny?
Was that today that I did that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it is one of the rare but certain instances of art and film removing and taking over the meaning of a word or words. Because Groundhog Day, 30 years ago meant like the groundhog would come up and maybe or not. Well, that's not what it means now.
That's true.
Ever since the film, Groundhog Day means doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, that would have been.
So I wonder if they redo Groundhog Day, they should just start it with, this is Infrastructure Week.
Right. We should start out Infrastructure Week by playing I Got You, Babe, and
something like that. So Mark Murray tweets, distractions have derailed Trump's economic message, and they're likely to derail the latest Infrastructure Week. The dominant weekly political story.
Infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Get that? Clever? Yeah. Or it may come to a crashing halt, also.
Oh, I think I just derailed this segment. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. The dominant weekly political storylines of 2018. Week of January 1st, Michael Wolff's Fire and Fury. Week of January 8th, Trump's S-hole country's remark. Week of January 15th, the government shutdown. Week of January 22nd, the report that Trump wanted Mueller fired back in June. Week of January 29th, Trump White House authorizes release of the Nunes memo. Nunes?
Yeah, that guy.
Week of February 5th, White House defense, then firing of Rob Porter. And Trump's praise of him, and frankly, that's what dominated the weekend. He did a very good job when he was in the White House. Apparently did a pretty good job on 2 of his marriages, too.
Yeah, excellent.
It depends what you want to hire him for.
Well, they all ended the same way.
Well, if you want a hitman, maybe like he's the guy.
Oh.
You don't know.
Okay.
That's what's going on. Well, look, I mean, the thing is, they knew about this.
Yes.
And John Kelly, who got tremendously bad press since the announcement of all of that, amazingly so. I have some of the headlines in the pundit roundup.
He's a general.
Yeah.
Hi,
Trump decries lack of due process as abuse claims bring Me Too movement to the West Wing. Yeah. Me Too movement is going to involve Trump, and of course that's their big problem. They don't know how to handle this because any serious handling, any serious managing, any serious acknowledgement of any of this sort of thing as being real is going right to Trump himself, and so they have to dance around that. Here's one headline: The debrief. In funhouse mirrors of Trump White House, disarray can look like victory. White House aides defend Kelly, insist Trump is not looking to replace Chief of Staff. That means they're looking to replace the Chief of Staff.
Yes, thank you for interpreting that.
Trump appears to doubt Me Too movement in tweet. GOP squirms as Trump veers off script with abuse remarks. And then, of course, this week, it's not really going to be infrastructure week. It's going to be market turbulence week. And the big thing that's happening in the Senate, they're actually going to sit down and debate stuff, specifically about immigration. So that's the background for all of this. And there's a really interesting story here by Margaret Sullivan in the Washington Post called "Will Truth Win Out? Rob Porter's departure holds a key to effective journalism in the Trump era."
Okay.
And she makes the point that with good journalism, all the denials and nonsense about, for example, the Rob Porter stuff just won't hold.
Okay.
Right? He shouldn't have been there to begin with, she writes, as a top aide of President Trump, given the long-standing and credible charges of domestic abuse from Colby Holderness, and she's the one with the bruised eye, along with other of his ex-wives and former girlfriend. I mean, when you just read that paragraph, it's like, it's not just one thing.
Yeah.
It's outrageous, but that's what it took. Porter's resignation, the very same day the photo of his ex-wife's beaten face was made public by The Intercept, speaks volumes about how reality can prevail. Truth will out, wrote Shakespeare in The Merchant of Venice. And, with all of that, what Kelly said he did is not what Kelly did. And there were reports that he had a staff meeting, and people at the staff meeting left and immediately leaked to the press he's lying.
Yeah, he tried to change the whole timeline and told everybody to basically, allegedly told everyone to just go lie about what he did, even though we all watched him do it or not do it, depending.
Exactly. And then there's a tweet from Jessica Corbett. My ex-husband claims the only reason I'm talking about the abuse is because I'm jealous of his job at the White House. Not true. I helped him get it. And this is in regard to David Sorensen, the other aide that had to leave because of spousal abuse.
Last week, yes.
So the White House has been roiled by all of that. And I mean R-O-I-L, not R-O-Y-L.
That I believe.
And, it's been just impossible for them to stay on top of it and really get to anything that they want to broadcast.
Yeah. There's also, by the way, floating out there, I'm not really sure what the provenance of this thing is, but I guess Axios has got it. But the Trump, somebody's floating the idea that privately Trump says he believes the allegations against Porter and that Porter's, as he says, a sick puppy. And now people are trying to sort of reconcile this public and private stance, which ordinarily is easy enough to believe that he's, lying publicly and has some totally different stance privately. But this one doesn't make any particular sense. So,
well, none of it makes sense. I mean, you have different factions trying to load different stories onto the press, but none of them match.
Right, and this one just doesn't get him anywhere. Like, okay, so the story is that he thinks the Republican base loves spousal abuse.
Well, Will Bunch had a really nice piece in Philly.com. He titled it, "Donald Trump became president of the United States of men today."
Oh, all right. Well, he truly did. Pivoting to men. That's good.
And in fact, he quoted a 1977 skit from Saturday Night Live about the patriarchy.
Oh?
Gently mocked the women's movement and less gently mocked the patriarchy with a TV talk show called You've Come a Long Way, Buddy, that promoted the work of male painters who who influenced many artists, and of course he was a man like Vincent Van Gogh, while music written by men like Beethoven played in the background. And the skit reached its absurdist crescendo when a cigar-smoking John Belushi appears as a character who launched a 24-hour rape hotline for men who've committed rape.
Oh, man.
Belushi's Sam Montgomery says the hotline gives rapists an opportunity to talk to somebody who understands what he's gone through, and it's completely anonymous. And Belushi says, very often to be known as a rapist is a social stigma, and it can ruin a man's life. That's a quote from Saturday Night Live in 1977.
The original, right.
And you go back and you look at the White House now and how they've responded to Rob Porter. And what's
wow. That's astonishing.
They're brilliant.
Wow. It's like they're time travelers, man.
Really? I mean, the whole idea is, what did Trump do? Trump went not only on Twitter, but, to all the stories, what he's been saying, in addition to he thinks that Porter may or may not be a sick puppy, and I have a feeling somebody's writing that for him.
Yeah.
What he really said was, he says very strongly he didn't do it, and wouldn't it be horrible if it ruined a man's life? I mean, it's right out of the Saturday Night Live skit. It's just incredible.
Maybe he was watching. He was, nearly 10 years out of school at that point, still working for his dad, collecting rent in the Section 8 apartments. So he probably had some time.
Right.
And, but he doesn't watch TV, so maybe that's wrong.
Right. So, the Trump-Russia thing is still, moving along here. Nice piece in the Daily Beast. Trump-Russia isn't about the cover-up. It's about the crime. There's still a lot that we know publicly that makes things look pretty bad in all of this. I don't think it's great to distract a scandal with another scandal. If the Trump-Russia scandal isn't on the front page, it's because the Rob Porter abuse scandal is. But that gets to the heart of the White House in terms of, it's in the White House because these people worked in the White House. And what did they do about it, and how did they respond, and how do they feel about abuse, and so on and so forth? And they just can't run fast enough to get away from it and change the subject. So they tried. I mean, the Olympics are starting.
Yes.
And maybe Armando can weigh in on this as well. But Mike Pence goes to Korea.
Yes.
And he takes a butt for the United States. He didn't take a knee. He took a butt.
Okay.
He sat on his butt while the combined Korean team came by, and he didn't stand for the host's team.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the sister of the horrible dictator from North Korea is there with a charm offensive, smiling and trying to woo the South Koreans into at least a visit and, being nice and trying to split the alliance between South Korea and the U.S. and to all accounts actually has done a fairly decent soft diplomacy job of it.
Yes, the accounts.
Pence didn't do so well.
That's true. I mean, they did come out with opposite reviews, and a lot of Twitter chatter this weekend and this morning reminding everybody, she's doing whatever, however you want to characterize the job she's doing with her charm offensive, brutal, oppressive regime, murdering thousands, perhaps millions. Okay. Good reminder. Thank you. Good talk. That's true. Although it has been interesting to watch. Granted, she has stuck to the script, has not shot anyone on Fifth Avenue,
right.
And that's the formula for success.
Well, it's very frustrating when the people who are the bad guys appear to be winning over the good guys. Yes.
It's amazing the number of people in the press who do recognize that, and then the number who don't. But it is pretty odd. Like you guys are setting the standard, and this is what happens when Donald Trump gets to set the bar, and all you have to do is literally not murder anyone on screen, and then smile or whatever, and that's it. You win. You win the PR offensive.
And it's been also interesting to watch the reaction from conservatives about this.
Yeah.
Which is, oh my God, these are terrible people.
Right. They're furious.
And how can you say that somebody who is terrible is good? And you might say, well, we're not saying that they're good. They're saying they're doing better at what they're trying to do than this other guy over here. No, it's the same thing. And, they deserve to be,
right.
Wait a minute, where's that going? I mean, it's almost as if when you start to go away from cardboard cartoon descriptions of people kind of like World War I, where you were describing the other side as the Hun and the barbarians and stuff like
Yes.
that. Are you trying to gin up a war? I mean, is this taking away from trying to gin up a war? I suppose that's what diplomacy is for.
Maybe. Yeah.
And
that's the purpose.
if succeeding at that, maybe they're succeeding at what they are trying to do, and that frustrates you because you're trying to gin up a war. I don't know.
Oh, maybe. I was wondering when they would see that their horrible person who's succeeding in making everyone think that they've got something going on in their heads and maybe are conducting a charm offensive, don't get called out as horrible people. And I thought, oh, well, but like your president is that, and you guys don't seem to, to recognize how frustrating that must be for the other half of America who hates this guy because he's awful. But I guess they'll never come around to that.
Well, maybe Armando can come on and we can talk about it.
We can try that.
We can try that.
Let's see. Oh, well, Armando, he's complaining. Are we talking about North Korea without me? Is that...
We talk about everything without you.
Yeah, well, yeah. If we don't, then we're wrong.
I mean, just about every morning we talk about.
But he does say now. Now I see why we have two channels of communication open. He wants to do. Wants to talk a little bit about Korea. Why don't we?
We want him. We want him on. He's got some good observations to make.
Well, then maybe I'll call. I think I have to call him.
You call him.
All right, let's try that.
I'll make breakfast while you call him.
All right, but now what? What
right.
number do I use for that? Okay, let's see.
Yeah, you do that, and I'll just mention a couple of other things that we might get to depending upon time. If we don't do it today, we're doing it tomorrow.
Right.
But the other thing that's happening internationally, not just Korea, is the fact that the United Kingdom is falling apart a bit. They don't know what to do with Brexit, hard Brexit, soft Brexit, whether or not it's going to be implemented, not implemented with a deadline coming up. So we got some stuff to cover that as well. We have some nice explainers about what's the difference between a soft Brexit and a hard Brexit and what's going on with Ireland.
All right. Let me give Armando a call here, and I want him to wait because I think it might make some music. We'll give it a shot. Okay. Let's try this out. All right. Let's see. Armando, are you there? Or Greg, are you there?
I'm definitely here.
All right, you're definitely here. Okay, I got some ringing. There's a picture. Armando, you with us?
Hey.
There you are.
Hey.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Wow, holy
Can you hear both of us?
I can.
Okay.
Hey, David finally figured out how to do it.
Yeah, right. I should
right.
play some music, see if you can hear that. Okay, not yet.
Now you can charge for the show, David.
Right. Okay. So we're. Oh, by the way, our break is coming soon. We're about what are we? It's 24 past the hour. We got 3 minutes.
Okay.
Let's talk.
Anyway, while you were gone, Armando, all we did is introduce the Korean concept, and we were talking a little bit about Twitter reaction. Didn't really get into it. We were leaving that for you.
I think it's a great starting point because, some of the headlines were overblown. I understand the objection. Oh, you're normalizing a dictator, a brutal totalitarian, starves his people dictator. That would be Kim Jong-un. The grandson of the original Kim. And it just, to me, misses everything. And I always draw from my own experience in discussing an issue that's very close to me, which is Cuba. And one particular issue, the embargo.
Okay.
The embargo, when you talk about the embargo, it's bad soft power diplomacy for the United States.
And you're allowed to criticize it.
And you're allowed not only to criticize it, but to frame it in this way. It's bad because it gives a dictator an excuse. It gives him a bogeyman. It's bad internally in Cuba. It's bad internationally because nobody agrees with your policy. You become the bad guy, and the other guy's a dictator.
But wait a minute. If you're criticizing the embargo, you're supporting Castro.
Exactly. You get the analogy perfectly. And, of course, people – I would argue with people about Cuba, but I would not argue with people about the embargo because the embargo was stupid, bad policy, bad diplomacy. What Mike Pence did, Vice President Mike Pence, if you will, was a terrible idea from the get-go. The entire idea was – it's not even that he performed badly, but he did. But the concept was crazy. You go to the Olympics, which its whole – phony myth is this is the time when we set our differences aside and We engage in sport, and this is all for peace and reconciliation. Isn't that the little line that you hear about the Olympics? When in fact, that's not the Olympics at all. It's all politics and corruption and nonsense.
Yeah, but Pence went over there and he took a knee.
He went over there and took a knee in a situation where taking a knee in an international sense is not what people expect at the Olympics, certainly not from the governments. You know, what you think of the athletes doing politics is one thing, in the sense that they earn their platform by competing athletically, and you can have a difference of opinion as to whether they take a knee or not. And I use that metaphorically.
But he legitimized the concept there.
I agree, but Mike Pence isn't even an athlete. The one thing we don't countenance, at least in concept, at the Olympics is bringing your political disputes as a state, as a government, to that fight. Now, you know, there's always been controversy, or as the Brits say, controversy.
Break in just a few minutes.
Yeah, 1 minute. Here.
Okay, about the idea of boycotts. But you boycott because I'm not going to be a part of it. The political dispute is too big for me to lay down my rhetorical arms during this Olympics. That's the concept. So I'm not going. I'm not going to play the part. And the Trump administration toyed with boycotting the South. By the way, it's the South Korea Olympics, by the way, not the North Korea Olympics.
Yes.
Yeah, but they had to go because there were parades, and they love parades.
That's true, they do. All right, well, we got our break coming up in just about 10 seconds here. So, but let's, if you can, hang on and continue with the concept on the other side of our first break. It's a very interesting thing that he's done here. I'd like to continue talking about it. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We still have Greg Dworkin and Armando both with us. Magic of technology has we just didn't press any buttons and it won't go away. So I think everybody is still here, and we left off heading into the north. Well, I was going to call it the North Korean
far
weekend.
north. Yeah.
With Mike Pence, and I'm just looking at the picture of him that illustrates the Dan Dresner piece that you mentioned of them just sitting, but they got some sporty coats on. They gave them, I guess, USA gear. Yeah, everybody else has, sort of like, well, no, the South Korean first couple, I guess, has got some parkas on. Everybody else is in sort of dark overcoats, and I don't know, looking rather more distinguished, I think, than these guys in their matching red, white, and blue parkas. Looks like garanimals a little bit, but okay.
So this Dresner piece has two parts to it. I'm going to go first because I have to scoot out, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the coverage and how that's working, and maybe Armando can actually get into the depth of the policy, which is sort of kind of important. But what Dan Dresner points out, his title is North Korea really winning the soft power Olympics? Maybe Mike Pence had a bad soft power weekend. And actually goes into the fact that many Americans spent the weekend watching the Winter Olympics. A few other Americans spent the weekend getting very, very angry at the Western media coverage of the politics, where they write to be outraged and then give some headlines. New York Times, without a word, only flashing smile, Kim Jong-un's sister outflanked President Pence in diplomacy. One from CNN, Kim Jong-un's sister stealing the show. Washington Post had a kind of obnoxious one. The Ivanka Trump of North Korea captivates people in the South. I can understand getting mad at that one. Right? You don't have to make it personal and bring Ivanka into it because she's useless and she can't function at that level. North Korea judge winner of diplomatic gold at Olympics, says Reuters. And that's all bad enough. But once you get past the annoying headlines, the actual stories painted a mixed picture. That's what Armando will talk about. But after a weekend of the U.S. appearing to be wrong-footed, it's nice to see some U.S. diplomatic efforts change the narrative for a day. And the thing is, there's many ways that this can go and work to the U.S.'s advantage if they actually try to do some soft power diplomacy, because there's a role for that. But the way it's being covered in the media is just getting conservatives mad, and they're having this knee-jerk reaction of, well, you're just saying that because you hate Pence. So anything Pence does, you say the other guys win, and they're monsters, so, the hell with you. But it's a lot more than that. The fact of the matter is that part of the audience of what she's doing is South Korea, not us. And if you're going to cover it, you have to cover it in terms of how it plays in South Korea, not how it plays at Breitbart.
I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, diplomacy necessarily is defined as international, not your base. I mean, Pence won over his base. Is this defense? I don't understand that at all. But the concept isn't even that Pence was bad at it, and he was, but the idea was harebrained. It's just not the place that it's going to ever work. People don't want. Look, I was about to say why I think one of the most famous protests of all time, the John Carlos Tommy Smith protest at the '68 Olympics, is different. And I think the difference is they weren't making an international protest, as I interpret it. Now I was 6 at the time, so I couldn't tell you how I interpreted it then. The reality is that a protest of, let's say it was North Korean athletes protesting North Korea at the Olympics. Now that would be bad politics for North Korea. Their own people are protesting. Yes. When the United States, when the Trump administration, which has been, basically saber rattling North Korea for a year now, goes to the Olympics, which is in its history, of course, the Greek tradition is that any wars would stop during the Olympics.
Right.
Any disputes would stop during the Olympics, and that was supposedly embedded into the modern games.
Yes, right. No nudity, but the peace message.
Right. Without the nudity.
I'm just saying.
And the Greco-Roman wrestling.
Right.
And the idea of it is it was flawed from the start. It was never going to work as diplomacy. It as domestic politics, I suppose it might work. And when people say at Dresdner, as you probably noted, in an exchange with Iran, let's look at the polling. I'm like, the polling where? The polling in the United States isn't going to help our diplomacy.
All right. Oh, Armando, if I can just for a second, I know, Greg, I guess you've got to run.
I do.
Is that right? Okay. All right. Well, we'll let you make that exit out the back door. Thank you for joining us, though, earlier.
Okay. One thing to just add before I go,
yes.
A completely separate topic that'll just take a second. This is today is when health policy Valentines start, given the week. It's one of those health policy.
Thing?
It is for years and years. For years and years and years. Emma Sandoz started it when she was at HHS. And health policy wonks send each other Valentines, and we have for like 3 or 4 years. She's the official starter. She says it starts today. And so for the next 3 days, health policy Valentines. That's the hashtag. Mine today, my offering is roses are red, Trump is a jerk. Get your jab when it's offered because vaccines work. And you'll see plenty of these all day today, and I just wanted you to know where they're coming from.
Yeah, I didn't get that either. Okay, I got it now. Thanks very much.
It's the real thing. Just click on the hashtag health policy Valentines. You'll see lots of them today. Take care, and back to Korea.
Okay. It's cold in Korea. All right, thanks very much, Greg. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday. Yeah?
Hey, take care.
Thank you. All right, let's continue on. Armando?
Well, I'll just finish up, and I'll actually hand you back your show. Because I just think I'm going to say something you'll like in a bit about the show. But first, let me finish on this Korea thought. The whole concept wasn't going to work, and it was perilous. It wasn't perilous. It was stupid. It was a stupid idea. It had no chance of succeeding. Even if Pence was the most charming diplomat in the history of diplomacy, he's not.
So now the plan we're talking about here is what? Just his presence at the Olympics at all, or the plan to go and not stand for the Koreans?
Listen, he announced he wasn't going to let them get away with a PR show.
Oh, I don't think I actually registered that.
Because
he's nobody.
Yeah, no, I did. I remembered thinking to myself, boy, this is stupid. And, of course, Kim sent his sister, who is relatively telegenic, and smiled. And here's Pence doing the Pence thing and the crazy things that these people think is effective stuff, and it may be effective in the Rust Belt, if you will. But the Rust Belt isn't going to help you on diplomacy. If you're really interested in trying to create what, and I'm not even sure what they're trying to create. Stiffness in South Korea, because South Korea doesn't want a war because obviously they're the ones that are going to pay the price. Kim Jong-un doesn't care how many North Koreans are killed. He's a monster. His sister's probably a monster too. And so then the question is, what are you trying to achieve? Get everybody to agree that they're monsters? Okay, we agree. Now what? It's what you need to do is have South Koreans agree on a policy that you think is going to work. That's the other, of course, problem. The Trump administration has no idea of what the policy of a winning policy. They even talk about craziness like what is it, the bloody nose strategy. You've heard about that, right?
To launch a bloody nose strike a first strike on North Korea. Not necessarily nuclear, but just to give them the bloody nose and scare them off from, as I understand the concept.
Let's say Tomahawk missiles. Let's say that they're planning to shoot 100 Tomahawk missiles, just to put something on it, which is, okay, that's bad, and people will die, but it's not a nuclear holocaust. So, okay. So it has that in its favor. North Korea is going to fire into South Korea. You remember Saddam Hussein's strategy in the first Gulf War, when the attack started, he started shooting at Israel because he could reach Israel.
Yes.
And he tried to provoke Israel into going into the war, and Israel, at the behest of the Bush administration, stayed out, and that held that coalition together. And it was an act of very good diplomacy, in my opinion, by the Bush administration of that time, Bush 41. Here, the North Koreans are going to shoot at South Korea. Yeah. And presumably South Korea will shoot at North Korea. There is no bloody nose strategy that doesn't lead to a conventional war on the Korean Peninsula. Because that's what's going to happen. Anybody with a brain knows that's what's going to happen. Why would you be for that? Because you're stupid is why. And it stretches into this. So what is it that Mike Pence was trying to achieve here in his Olympic diplomacy strategy? I don't know what he was trying to achieve other than make Mike Pence look like he's an important person.
I guess.
That he has something to do. What was the diplomatic strategy here? And this is where I disagree with Dresser. What's he expect to happen in the next 10 days or whatever's left of this Olympics? It's going to turn this around. I assume Mike Pence is left, or is he still there?
I don't know. I doubt they left him there for very long, but normally they make a 3-day thing out of it. Okay,
it's been about 3 days or 4 days, however many days it's been. And he doesn't stay the whole time, at least not that I've ever seen.
Well, let's see.
And so what exactly is going to happen that's going to turn this around? I mean, it's sort of,
I don't know.
The opening ceremonies is when you do these things. You act like an adult. Look, Cuba has marched in Olympics forever, and they have great athletes, and a lot of it is, frankly, a result of the oppression of the people and spending all this money on their sports programs for prestige purposes and home consumption. Mm-hmm. The United States never acted the fool when the Cubans marched in, or when the Russians marched in, for that matter, during the Cold War.
Right.
If we didn't do it then, there was a good reason, because the whole image of the Olympics is putting those things aside. So it was just nonsense, and the idea that someone's going to get upset because we're pointing out that this was a Looney Tunes stupid strategy by Pence, and they're saying, well, you look at you supporting Kim. I'm not supporting Kim. I'm pointing out that what Pence did was idiotic. What the Trump administration did was idiotic, and not because I hate Trump, though I do. This is, I think, a fairly cold assessment of what was a, frankly, idiotic strategy. Again, to me, I do analogize it to the embargo and the stupidity of it, because it didn't work, and all it did was create a public diplomacy fiasco for the United States, and it still does for 50 years. Nobody follows it. No one thinks the United States looks better for it. It's just bad policy. So there was no purpose for it other than local consumption. And that would be the purpose of Pence's little stunt here. I'm going to finish up by saying something about your show. You pointed out something about making a living on podcasts today in a tweet.
Yes, some other person is doing that.
Right. And I actually do want to make that point, because unlike myself, whose living is really, I get to just come on. David does all the heavy lifting. He organizes. He gets everything done. I come on. I get to spout. Greg gets to talk about it before it goes off to work. And I think people misunderstand something about the relationship with Daily Kos. Daily Kos does provide financial support in terms of different things, and it gives a marketing push. But I urge people who listen to understand this is what he's doing, and it's not an alternate job. This is what he does 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. He is working on this, and he really deserves your support. If you can make it $5, $10 a month, you're getting something that you just do not get anyplace else. And I don't mean me. You get me everywhere. You get him doing the work, to look things up, to do the research, to have more knowledge on congressional procedure than you'll ever hear. You'll get coverage of gun issues in ways that you don't get anyplace else. And frankly, just general, listenable, understandable, and yet fairly comprehensive coverage of the news of the day. And in a way, I mean, from a perspective that just isn't available anymore, I think that's worth $5 or $10 a month. If you were a subscriber to the New York Times and not a subscriber to David Waldman, you're a bad person. Because
hey,
David gives it to you in ways that the New York Times just fails to and refuses to do. I urge you to join Patreon. David, if you will give me the information that I don't have, which is of the different ways to contribute to this broadcast that's been going for many years now, and deserves more support than it's getting from its listenership.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It's very difficult to do, for yourself to get out there and to, say that. It's a tough thing to do. That's why politicians hate raising money. It's awkward and weird. Every day when we post the podcast, every day when we post the Daily Kos Radio is live post, every day when we join the midday open thread, every time you find a player embedded at Daily Kos, with the day's show or the previous day's show underneath, there are, of course, links to our Patreon page, link to our Square Cash page. We had to eliminate one to make room for everything else, but we also, of course, use PayPal for things like that. And then now the new Radio Public link, which allegedly pays for listening on their platform. So all of those links are out there. We can certainly share them. If you go to patreon.com, patreon.com, and search for my name, either David Waldman or Kagro or KagroX or any variant of it, you will very quickly come up with our page, and you can join up. And easy thing to do. So far, they've been pretty secure with all their data. I haven't heard anything. I guess inevitably everybody has their data breached at some point, which is just part of the modern condition, I guess. But they've been pretty secure so far, and easy way to sign up for recurring donations that you don't have to worry about from month to month. It is possible to do under PayPal conditions, but much easier in Patreon. And of course, if a one-time donation is more your speed, we can make it work on Patreon, make it work on PayPal, or Square Cash. Easy also. Square all about actually the back end security. They are a credit card processor over the internet, so they're pretty constantly on alert to guard everyone's information there. But yeah, we just do this. We enjoy doing the show, and as you mentioned, there's nominal support because it's Daily Kos branded. But yeah, it doesn't pay a living. That's not what that's about. This is about, well, okay, you're contributing to the Daily Kos brand, and you've got some infrastructure costs, the podcasting service, the hosting, the computers, etc. Fine, but other than that, yeah, if you're talking about making a living out of the show, that's something at this point somebody else has figured out how to do. We have not reached that threshold, and there are a lot of people who contribute to the show who might also be interested in making a living at it as well. Small steps, I suppose, but yeah, at some point, someday, I guess if things don't change, the ultimatum comes. You're going to have to decide what you want to do for an actual living when you grow up. Nice that you do the podcast, but yeah, preparing for, executing, producing, distributing, maintaining the infrastructure behind a 2-hour daily podcast each day is not really a part-time undertaking, though that was the way I originally approached it. But there's less and less time to make your living elsewhere when you're maintaining a schedule like this one. So I appreciate it. Thanks. Kind words.
And just as I really do reiterate my my ask, this is the best 10 hours of coverage that you'll get on issues that are important to this listenership. You listen for a reason. Let's make sure David can continue to do this. So I urge you, $5 a month, $10 a month, find a way. We can do it, and I urge you to do it too.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Appreciate the time. Appreciate the support that we do have from everybody who gives it. And there's a few more each time, and new listeners each time, and then there are just a couple people who say, I've been a long-time listener, and I really meant to do it, and this final push got me to do it. I wish I had a tote bag for you. the only thing we're missing here. But that's always in the works in the background, too. Oh, we ought to come up with a trinket. We ought to put out T-shirts. But, again, the bulk of the day is spent on just actually putting the show out there. I suppose if I did it, half-hour show, that'd be a hell of a lot easier. But then we wouldn't have time for all the jokes.
You wouldn't be able to give the same coverage and the same reach and go to the same depth into the issues. That's the whole point. What you're getting here
Great point. I knew that
on this radio show is unlike anything you get anywhere else. Even the more trendy or hipster podcasts that people like. They have their shticks and they have their formulas. What they don't do, in my view, is go into an issue and dig into it and go to primary sources and really just spend 30 minutes on something. Nobody spends 30 minutes on any issue in any format. Sometimes you'll do an hour on an issue. That doesn't happen anywhere else, and that's why it's worth it. I urge you again, $5 a month, $10 a month. See what you can afford if you appreciate what you're getting here, and you should. And with that, I am going to hand you back to David, and he is going to deliver more of what I've just talked about.
Uh-oh. All right. Well, thank you. Again, I appreciate
no
it. Yeah, right. Now it's on. Thanks for coming on today. Yeah, the North Korea thing going a little crazy. Oh, look. All right. Parleo has chimed in and says the answer is definitely in merchandise, and sends me a mock-up of a Daily Kos Radio T-shirt. Now, have not created this T-shirt. don't get too excited. But I'll share it with you. If you're listening live, you'll see it fly by, and perhaps we'll include it in the write-up for today, just to get a peek at it. And we've had a couple of people step forward and volunteer services for designing such a shirt. And then we just, get bogged down in things like, what will we put on it? And should we drive people to a website? And if so, which one? And if we drive them to Daily Kos, will they be able to find the radio vertical? I don't know. And do we have a URL that's simple and easy to remember and short enough to print on a T-shirt? Well, I'll try and get one. And you see these things begin to get in the way. And, it's tougher than it looks for whatever reason. But, okay, I appreciate the pitch because I can't make it for myself. I attempted to sort of try and do that by recording those little bits that we then include in the podcast. Probably time to refresh those, too. And like I said, it works in drips and drabs. People come in, and I do appreciate it. We're getting close to, I guess our first goal. Maybe that's it. We should have put up a thermometer or one of those thermometer gauges on how we're doing in raising money. If you go to patreon.com and you find the page, the numbers are out in the open. And I guess you don't have to display that, actually. But we do because, I don't know, it sort of seems Daily Kos-ish to make sure that the situation is transparent. What are we sitting at? 129 patrons contributing monthly, and that is very nice. And we have $861 monthly at the moment, which also is helpful. I'm not saying it isn't. It's not. You don't get me into a crumbs situation here. But the modern condition being what it is, and of course the Washington D.C. area being what it is in terms of expenses of living here, and kids getting to be college age, and people beginning to wonder in the house where and when might we see a larger, let's say, and steadier stream of income such that, things that have to be paid for will be paid for, or is it time to see whether they need more, Walmart greeters or something like that? We hope we can give it a little bit more time and see if things will work out before we reach those, that level of desperation. But, it's, it's not a great deal of coverage compensation-wise, that's true. All right, I want to get off the subject because it's uncomfortable and weird, but very necessary. And I give in to the necessity of having to do that and move on to the rest of the stories. Where were we? I don't even know. What else is on tap here? I have a couple of things open. I suppose, we started the show with the Scott Pruitt story. I don't know if there's really that much more to mine out of that story other than specific numbers and the amount of money he was spending on military jets, thousands and thousands of dollars, likewise on first-class seats. I guess probably running into the millions of dollars for security. Where does he fly to, the EPA administrator? There's a little chart about the different trips he's made and how much he's spent doing them. And, I don't know what the specific security claims were with respect to flying in first class, but I imagine it's along the lines of, there are fewer people around me, and so therefore I feel more secure. All right, well, anyway, that's not the most important of the various bits and pieces of news that are floating around out there. Let's get to some of them that I think are either more important or juicier, or in some cases just things that aren't likely to make mainstream traditional media headlines nationally, but that perhaps ought to. Let's see. We've put a couple of tweets away. One this morning that I grabbed from Jeff Stein, who tweets as Spy Talker. And who is Jeff Stein? We have to click on bios for everybody because I never remember anything. Jeff Stein is the Newsweek national security correspondent. So that's a pretty major little bit of credentials. He tweets today, how did Devin Nunes get so crazy? Good question. I went back a few years to find out, not time traveling, but he did some research. I went back a few years to find out and found Michael Flynn. Yes, the notorious spy Michael Flynn. And as it turns out, Michael Flynn was something of a mentor, I guess, to Devin Nunes, which is going to, pretty much leave you crazy and conspiracy-addled, and so he is. The Nunes memo, he refers to one of his own previous tweets, the Nunes memo reveals congressman's penchant for conspiracy theories, a piece in Newsweek that I thought perhaps might explain a few things. I saw a lot of people say it really turned the light on for them about, what he's all about and why he ended up the way he did. Looks like there might be some auto-playing video. We'll have to pause there. And, of course, we are nearing our next break. Let's give you a taste of what's up here and give you the leads here. Watching the Devin Nunes memo, remember the memo, blow up like a trick cigar a few weeks ago. Is it a few weeks ago already? Phew. Andrew Jans called himself probably the happiest man in the country. And here we have a little nod to our mission as Daily Kos. Andrew Jans, of course, the assistant district attorney vying to oust Nunes from his California congressional seat, running as a Democrat. Jans said last week that his campaign war chest had more than tripled since Nunes announced he was releasing highly edited top-secret information to discredit the FBI and Justice Department investigations into Russiagate. That's not saying much, of course, and I guess that's where it becomes up to us in order to make it say more, but as they say, it's not saying much. The Democrats' $240,000 purse would hardly cover the cost of robocalls in today's congressional elections, where winning candidates spend an average of $1.3 million, and Nunes already has 3 times that figure. And while there were some signs the incumbent's grip was slipping, a January poll commissioned by Jans showed Nunes leading by only 5 percentage points against a generic Democratic opponent. I guess there's more to do, but he's closing the gap. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show. We'll just take that 1-minute break up at the top of the hour. And that gives us a chance, without spending 2 minutes, which is long enough for us to forget what we were talking about when we first took the break, to get right back to this Newsweek article about the origins, I guess, of Devin Nunes' craziness and conspiracy theory mindedness. I'm making up words as I go along. But yeah, an opportunity right up at the top, by the way, to remind everybody that Andrew Jans, I guess we're still early in the season here, but I guess the leading Democratic candidate, now I have to check in, and I should have checked in with the Daily Kos election folks about, are there other Democrats who are running to unseat Nunes? It's early enough that you'd think people could still get in. I don't know what the deadlines are out there in California, and Nunes should be a popular target. But maybe that's just the case, that maybe it's the case that Jans is the only one, because you're talking about the $3 million in the Nunes war chest. Taking him on is no joke, even though there's only a 5% lead for Nunes against a generic Democratic opponent. And as they point out here in the Newsweek article, his highly edited release of the documents was actually proving popular among Republicans, but he should be something of a lightning rod. Still, the article continues, Jans told me, I'm feeling great, man. You've seen the memo. I think there's going to be plenty of folks on the Democratic side, and even some folks on the Senate Republican side, to poke holes in, which is to say what they did. The Nunes memo fizzled and failed, said former Nixon White House counsel turned Watergate witness John Dean in a representative view. The only thing it established is that Nunes is a nut job, and he has released anew the putrid stench of neo-McCarthyism. Nut job has clung to Nunes' reputation as long as he's been chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. That's HPSCI in Washington speak. That would be the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. We just say the Intelligence Committee, or House Intelligence Committee, just to be sure which one it is. HPSCI. Permanent Select kind of committee. It's always fun to have that many, adjectives attached to your committee description. All right, where were we? Anyway, so Nutjob has clung to his reputation since taking the chair there, or at least among Democrats and some Republicans, too, actually, who have decried Nunes' transformation of a once bipartisan national security panel, this is an important point here, into a GOP platform to attack Democrats. The intelligence panels, really, yeah, true. Both houses traditionally have been pretty bipartisan because it's kind of, well, it used to be sort of taboo to politicize intelligence operations since they were national security related. But, it was politicized. It just wasn't partisanized to the same extent that some other panels were. Jans, though, thinks he knows why. And his suggestion is Nunes's mentorship by Michael Flynn, the now disgraced former Trump national security advisor and guilty party to this whole Trump-Russia business. Of course, I know that they had a pretty close relationship, Jans said. Nunes served on the executive committee of the Trump transition team with Flynn, he noted, which was headed by that guy who went to Korea and screwed everything up, Vice President now, Mike Pence. And it seems to me like he never left. He's still on that team. And that's pretty close. That rings pretty true for the rest of us who see him sneaking off to the White House in the middle of the night and really apparently having them script the whole memo stunt from start to finish and then refusing to answer questions put to him directly by Democrats on the committee. Did you work with the White House on this memo? No answer. And, meaning, of course, yeah, he did. They gave it to him. They probably dictated it to him. Now for some background. A descendant of Portuguese Azorean immigrants, Nunes grew up on a Central Valley, California farm and concentrated on water issues when he came to Congress in 2003. And that's how I remember him, by the way, prior to this Intelligence Committee posting. I remember, just some backbencher dude from California who was concentrating on water issues, which to me is boring, but for Central Valley, California is everything there is. And, it made good sense, good constituent service, but boring stuff. Anyway, his fundraising prowess for fellow Republicans endeared him to Representative Paul Ryan and then House Speaker John Boehner, who in 2013 anointed him chairman of the Intelligence Panel for no apparent reason. Like many hawks back then, Nunes was in awe of Flynn, who had won praise for revolutionizing the hunt for terrorists in Iraq and Afghanistan. This guy was one of the best intelligence officers in several generations, Nunes told me in a December 23rd, 2016 interview. I don't know if you've ever met him, but Flynn is extremely smart. He really is top-notch, and, of course, he's guilty. But, it's his own plea. What can I tell you? I'm not making that up. Nunes was speaking 5 months after Flynn had startled many former military officers by leading lock her up chants against Hillary Clinton at the Republican National Convention. It was also 2 years after the Obama White House has forced Flynn's resignation as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. What happened, Nunes told me, is he went out and said a lot of things that Obama didn't like. But that's not close to the full story on Flynn, whose battlefield talents didn't transfer well to running the DIA from 2012 to 2014. Not only were his executive skills lacking, according to many observers, including former Army General and Secretary of State Colin Powell, he quickly developed a reputation for indulging conspiracy theories, or Flynn facts, as his aides derisively called them. Just a short pause here for a moment to note, though, in our both sides world or our hyper-partisan world, and both sides are hyper-partisanized and you can't find the middle and blah, blah, blah. Note that now from 2012 to 2014, of course, Barack Obama was still president. And the Defense Intelligence was still an important agency. And Mike Flynn clearly still was, and he had been for some time, a pretty hardcore conservative Republican, though I'm sure as an active duty general he didn't declare a party affiliation. It was probably a good guess, and guessable even then, that he was probably Republican, but it's pretty clear that he was going to align himself with arch conservatives, just basic on a on a policy level. Like, where is he serving? What's he doing? Where is he coming from? And, I guess you've got limited choices when it comes to top brass in the military. They're likely to approach things from obviously a militaristic viewpoint, and that very often or most often aligns with conservative ways of thinking and voting, especially if you are wrapped up in the global war on terror, et cetera, et cetera. But again, Obama could have, and eventually did, I guess, shop elsewhere for a DIA head. But note that when a real president, particularly a Democrat, is in charge of things, and somebody comes highly recommended, and he's brilliant, and a real forward thinker and breakthrough thinker on the war on terror, and so you say, despite the fact that he could be, a cuckoo bananas Republican, at that point, perhaps we didn't have the sense of what that really meant and how far gone you had to be in order to be one of these cuckoo bananas conservative Republican alt-right type figures. They said, this Democratic administration said, we'll take him. It might be good for the job, and that might be good for security, and that might be good for America. So we'll take it, this crazy-ass Republican, and we'll put him in charge of this thing, and we'll see if he can apply his skills here. Some people have expressed some doubts about that. We'll keep a close eye on him, and as it turns out, the confidence in him was unwarranted, and he had to be bounced. But think about the odds, let's say, of having that happen in the Trump administration, or really in any of the Republican administrations, but especially now. The idea, can you imagine going to Trump and saying, well, sure, he's a Democrat, and sure, as a Democrat, he campaigned for Hillary Clinton and against you, but this person, he, she, whoever, is, top of their field and can really contribute to the security and well-being of Americans. Too bad. Who cares? No, they didn't say enough nice things about me. You're out and bring a crazy person in. Who? Which crazy person? How about a blogger who's written racist posts and is a ghost hunter? It doesn't matter. They literally don't even care as long as they've said something good about me. And if they've ever said anything bad about me, they could be the foremost experts in the world, and I don't want anything to do with them. And I think underappreciated in the press, even though I know a lot of reporters know this stuff to be true, it just rarely gets reflected in the reporting, and certainly not at the level necessary for it to be reflected in the common sense, everyday thinking of even nominally engaged Americans. This does not register with them that this is the case. But as we sell them more and more both-siderism, honestly, as has been pointed out in the past, never been a Democrat as FBI director. And it's been a long, long time, or it had been a long, long time before the final years of even the Obama administration, since Democrats felt comfortable appointing Democrats as their own secretaries of defense. It was a very common thing to do, to say, well, look, we want the Democrats, for whatever reason. Look, it's bad strategy and it never really worked out. But the thought was there that people were saying, what can we do to convince people that we're serious about national security? Well, apparently the only thing we can think of is to say, because it doesn't matter what we think of in terms of policy. We could put forth any policy, and Republicans and conservatives will reject it out of hand because it came from Democrats. And in that sense, by the way, this Trump business is nothing new. Trump hates this because Obama came up with it, and it's nonsense. This is a policy that works, and it makes sense, and works domestically. Our allies like it. It's great for trade, whatever. Oh, who cares? Reverse it because Obama. It's not something he invented, right? We have our own approach to national security, or to make probably, I guess if Glenn Greenwald were here on the show co-hosting, he'd say, well, it's not not Democrats inventing their own approach to national security. Their approach to national security was do the thing that Republicans want to do. There's no difference in many respects between the party positions in the past, anyway, up to even to the recent past, in their approaches to national security. Hawkish, anti-Iran and pro-Israel. et cetera, in the Middle East. And, pretty much marching to the same beat everywhere. And, okay, there's a lot of validity to that. And as a result, Democrats very often said, well, not only are we going to follow conservatives on policymaking, but it doesn't matter if we follow them on policymaking. They still deride us as weak and ineffective. And when we say, look, we've just adopted your position, they say, I don't care. No, you haven't. Fake news, and attack us anyway. Well, the only way we can prove it is what if we put one of them in charge, and then they can't lay it at our feet. But, they find ways to lay it at Democrats' feet anyway. It's as much a commentary on the weakness of the strategy behind the Democratic Party as anything else, but that's not where I really hoped to end up with this article. But it's worth pointing out that there's no credit given for it anyway, so maybe you might as well not do it. I don't know. But maybe a better short-term goal would be, hey, why don't you give credit? Can't we at least work on that? But, in our new LOL, YOLO, nothing matters world, I guess it's the last straw here. We're never going to recover and get the credit people deserve for including the other side, even though the other side doesn't include our side ever under any circumstances, and yet somehow both sides, yada, yada, not a dime's worth of difference, yada, yada. Okay, sorry. Tangent. Back to the Newsweek article. Right, we were talking about how Nunes was a bit in awe of Flynn, even as Flynn's staff were rolling their eyes at Flynn facts, as they called his conspiracy theories when he was working at DIA and elsewhere. But Nunes embraced them, these crazy conspiracy theories. During Flynn's tenure, the neophyte intelligence overseer and the general came to share a number of beliefs. And that's important to point out, and also it's good for the campaign, and it's good for understanding Nunes and his craziness. These guys overlapped in their worldview, their policy view, their political approaches, and one of them is basically a spy and has had to plead guilty to lying to the FBI, and the other is still in office and chairing the Intelligence Committee. So these guys are hand in glove with one another. One basically still working on his plea deal and awaiting sentencing for lying to the FBI in a case that will likely develop into an obstruction of justice case against either the president or his campaign or both. And the other is running the intelligence show from the House of Representatives. That's problematic. Think of them as identical twins ideologically, and you begin to see the issue. But they're not, in fact, identical twins, and so, therefore, that's a little bit unfair. Let's just read on then, shall we? During Flynn's tenure, the neophyte intelligence overseer, Nunes, and the general, Flynn, came to share a number of beliefs. One was that the CIA was suppressing the release of documents captured from Osama bin Laden's lair that supposedly showed a closer relationship between al-Qaeda and Iran than the Obama White House, then conducting back-channel talks with Tehran on halting its nuclear weapons program, wanted known. Now, that's interesting, although, again, we'll point out that the last Republican administration insisted that there was a super close relationship between al-Qaeda and Iraq. And if we just tortured enough Iraqis, we would finally find the evidence of that close working relationship. And then we found out, oh my gosh, it's really not there, because al-Qaeda are fundamentalist Sunni Muslims who insisted on their desire to see established theocratic Sunni Muslim states all over the Middle East and anywhere around the world where Islam could take root. And, that was a bit of a pipe dream on their part, but that's what they were into. And they couldn't make it work because, of course, Saddam Hussein, when he was still in power, though he was Sunni, had no real interest in a caliphate there. He was a secular Muslim, and the Ba'ath Party was very much reactionary to Islamic fundamentalism, and they wanted to be players in the modern geopolitical world, while, of course, not abandoning their nominal religious ties and using whatever leverage that gave them with their more fundamentalist citizenry. That was fine, of course, for them. But the idea of a close participation between Baathists and Al-Qaeda was pretty far-fetched. And no matter how many people we tortured, we just couldn't find it. It just wasn't there. Now, of course, having failed, I guess, to establish that, the Looney Tunes side is pretty sure, and I don't know, maybe they're right, but I don't think so. It's a little difficult to believe that there's a super close working relationship between Sunni fundamentalist jihadists and Shia fundamentalist jihadists, if that's what you believe, is running the show in Tehran. And, you're not too far off base. There's certainly an argument can be made for that. The idea, though, of the two of them working together, again, not super likely, and probably less likely than an Al-Qaeda Ba'athist collaboration would be. An Al-Qaeda, Sunni or Shiite Muslim and not even Arabic government in Iran. It's another point of separation. Persians versus Arab. It's not super, it's not beyond the pale. Weirder things have happened. But again, how long have we been searching for the evidence and not coming up with anything? How long are you going to hold on to this thing? Nunes, according to a then close observer, demanded the CIA open up its files for him. Show me everything you got from bin Laden's lair. Open up the files for me and for Flynn, by the way, one Saturday. I don't know which Saturday this was. He was going to sneak up on them on a weekend, the source snorted, speaking on terms of anonymity to discuss the sensitive incident. Nunes denied that excursion, but he said he did go down to Central Command headquarters in Tampa to meet with the team that was doing exploitation of the documents in 2013. He and Flynn seemed to share an obsession with Iran. There are lots of people who are obsessed with Iran. Nunes concurred with Flynn's insistence that Tehran was involved with the 2012 attacks on the U.S. consulate and annex in Benghazi, and oversaw a 2-year investigation into the incident, focusing on what Republicans had portrayed as the Obama administration's inept responses. But the committee's final report, signed by its then chairman, Mike Rogers, debunked a series of persistent allegations hinting at dark conspiracies and concluded that there was no intelligence failure, no delay in sending a CIA rescue team, no missed opportunity for a military rescue, and no evidence the CIA was covertly shipping arms from Libya to Syria, according to the Associated Press's account. The report also found no evidence tying Benghazi to Iran. Whoops. Nunes, of course, called it a, quote, whitewash. The congressman's nutty reputation was enhanced in 2013 when he insisted on moving a joint U.S.-UK intelligence base from England to where? The Azores, his ancestral home. And I'm sure, once again, I forgot last time we learned how to pronounce that when it was on the air. I've since wiped it from my mind. You know what we're talking about. That is an interesting idea, moving it from the UK to the Azores. Yes, and I think we noted that at the time. That might have been the last crack at pronouncing the place. The $1.2 billion price tag and national security concerns about relocating to such an obscure spot in the mid-Atlantic doomed the effort, according to an investigation by the National Review, of all places. But in an early preview of charges that he cherry-picked items for his Russiagate memo to undermine the FBI and Justice Department, the Pentagon accused Nunes' staff of manipulating the numbers on the Azores gambit. And I think, as I recall, did we finally decide that was it Azores? Okay. No evidence has surfaced that then DIA Director Flynn a native of Rhode Island, home to thousands of Azorean immigrants, had anything to do with that affair. That'd be a stretch, but okay. Rhode Island. When you can work Rhode Island into the discussion, you should. But he and Nunes paired up to champion another issue, one that they were right about. Oh my gosh. Whistleblower accusations that U.S. Central Command leaders were manipulating intelligence reports to burnish the Obama administration's record against the Islamic State group. Flynn, according to the Weekly Standard, was annoying the White House with assessments that al-Qaeda had doubled in strength over the preceding 2 years. Nunes was helping lead a Republican-led joint congressional task force into the issue. At one point, he flew down to CENTCOM headquarters demanding to see documents, again, according to reports, but once in Tampa was denied access to the analysts and their findings, creating further schisms between the parties. The task force ultimately backed up the whistleblower complaints. So did the Pentagon's Inspector General. Nunes and Flynn evidently maintained close ties through the election and beyond, even as Flynn's world was beginning to unravel with questions about his payments from Kremlin mouthpiece Russia Today, secret talks with former Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak, and a confidential lobbying contract with a law firm tied to Turkish strongman, oh boy, remember him again, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Erdogan, right? Did we get the Erdogan? Yeah, the G sounding kind of like a Y. I think we got that. Erdogan. I talk to Flynn virtually every day, if not multiple times a day. Nunes told me in a late December 2016 interview. He wasn't, of course, hadn't yet pled guilty at that point, but they talked every day, multiple times a day. Seldom there's a day that goes by, or seldom does a day go by, I might have said, that I don't talk to Flynn, and especially right after the campaign, directly. That's not something that you would necessarily want on the record if you knew what was coming down the pike, but I guess he didn't. But he didn't, and something put him in charge of intelligence. Okay, good idea. Despite the troubling revelations about Flynn's Turkish dealings, it says deadlings here. I think that's probably a typo, but you never know. In Turkey, you could be a deadling. Despite troubling revelations about Flynn's Turkish dealings, Nunes accompanied him to a January 18th breakfast at the Trump Hotel, oh my goodness, in Washington, featuring Turkish Foreign Minister, oh boy, Mevlut Cavusoglu. And again, that G is probably Cavusoglu. There we go. According to a report in the Istanbul newspaper Daily Sabah. Questioned by U.S. reporters, Nunes' spokesman Jack Langer, if he's Turkish, called the meeting a large breakfast event. He's a clever fellow, that Langer. Attended by 20 to 30 ambassadors to the U.S. and about 10 other foreign dignitaries and officials. But the Daily Sabah, which is considered close to the Erdogan regime, contradicted that statement, saying Cavusoglu was the only foreign leader at the breakfast. Oh. Not 20 or 30. So off by 20 or 30, I guess. Only foreign leader at the breakfast, which was closed to the press and featured topics on the U.S.-Turkish agenda. Langer told the fact-checking site Snopes that if he did speak to Cavusoglu, it would have been among all the other ambassadors and officials at the event. There was no separate private meeting. But then we found out that maybe there weren't any other ambassadors at the event. Flynn's ties to the Erdogan regime may have had a darker side. About 6 weeks before the election, Flynn and two business associates attended a secret New York meeting with Cavusoglu and Berat, oh my God, you're trying to kill me with these Turkish names, Berat al-Bayrak, Erdogan's son-in-law, and the country's energy minister. Great. No dictatorships going on there, I guess. The topic, plans to kidnap the prominent exiled anti-Erdogan cleric, oh my goodness, Fethullah Gulen in Pennsylvania and return him to Turkey. The meeting stayed secret until late March 2017 when the Wall Street Journal exposed it. Exposure. In that account, by the way, Woolsey, and we don't, there we are. Did we skip a part here? Yeah, that's right. Also present at the meeting was James Woolsey, the former CIA director and then Trump senior advisor. Let's see. The meeting, according to Woolsey, said he had cautioned Flynn and the others not to carry out any illegal operations and reported the discussion to a mutual friend of Vice President Joe Biden. Be careful you don't violate any laws. Don't do anything illegal, guys. Even with that explicit warning, apparently they couldn't help themselves. All right, well, we'll finish up with this and recap after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And, hey, I can report the news from my inbox in Gmail that Armando's pitch worked. And I even have one that actually is titled that. Armando did the trick. Patreon worked. So thanks to those of you. And I guess I should I check ahead of time? I don't know. I was about to say, oh, well, so-and-so and this other person have made these donations. Thank you personally. And then I immediately thought, well, there's all these 129 other people I haven't thanked personally on the air, and probably I should go back and do that. But then some people might want to remain anonymous and or not give away their real names. And, oh, my goodness, there's all sorts of complications. I can only say this. Thank you to everybody who responded to Armando's pitch. It's makes it well worth going ahead and doing that, as embarrassing and as annoying as it is. And it takes us away from the, believe it or not, little amount of time, 2 hours, I know, that we have for digging into pieces of news like this. I'm scrambling through the rest of the Newsweek article here, mostly to find out if I'm going to have to pronounce any more Turkish names. I don't think so. We're, I think, off of the Turkey topic for the moment. It's weird. I should be getting better at my Turkish pronunciation, as for some reason I have gotten hooked on Turkish historical dramas on Netflix. And I might be the only person doing this. I'm not really sure. Every once in a while I check in on online and see, all right, if there's fan sites about this stuff and it's written in English, there are other people watching this. But I just was scanning around on Netflix and looking for something of interest, and I thought, oh, look at this. There's a historical drama soap opera, really. I know 1 or 2 Turkish folks that I checked in with on this, and they're like, oh, yeah, we would consider that a soap opera more than anything else. I don't know how historically based it is, but Magnificent Century, a historical drama soap opera thing based around the life of Suleiman the Magnificent. And very intriguing, right? You don't really learn this history. It was I think I mentioned it before. It was just weird to watch in terms of having studied history from the European perspective and the Ottoman Empire being the dark, exotic threat. And I mean that, dark. From the East, and you don't get much of the Ottoman perspective, let's say, in history class in America, or probably anywhere in Europe either. And then I ran into the problem of not all of the seasons were translated into English or available on Netflix, and I needed something else to watch. And I thought, oh, it would be interesting to go back even further in history, Turkish history, and watch this historical drama soap opera about Ertuğrul, the father of Osman, the first Ottoman Empire sultan, and the establishment of the empire. And so far, it's been really intriguing. Also, I don't think it's terrific stuff and beautifully acted or anything. It's just weird and interesting, and like, oh, you didn't really get any of this history here in America, but it has not improved my Turkish pronunciation other than of the name Ertuğrul, which also has one of those weird G's in there. It sounds like a Y. And it's because it's subtitled, and I read the subtitles and can only pay the scantest attention to pronunciations of the names. All right, but I think we're done with Turkey. As when we left off with this Newsweek story, we found out that James Woolsey had warned Flynn and Nunes, don't do anything illegal, don't carry out any illegal operations even. And, of course, reported the discussion to a mutual friend of Vice President Joe Biden. Mueller, which is spelled out with M-U-L-L-E-R. There's no E in here. I assume they mean Mueller, opened an investigation into Flynn's Turkey ties last November, according to multiple reports. Asked whether Flynn ever discussed the plot with Nunes, his spokesman, Langer, responded only, and with this question, Newsweek has completed its transformation into the National Enquirer, which is not a no. So thanks very much. Nunes, meanwhile, was busy defending Flynn and Trump on another matter, the National Security Advisor's secret conversations with Kislyak. Had the president-elect approved those talks, and did they include promises to reverse the Obama administration's punishment of the Kremlin for its interference in the 2016 elections? In an unusually partisan step, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who was supposed to be leading an investigation into Russian subversion and Team Trump, anointed himself one of the administration's leading defenders. Trump and Flynn, he opined, were so busy that they wouldn't have had time to discuss talking to Kislyak. That's a hell of a conclusion. A Washington Post headline called Nunes' explanation strange and printed it in full. And it reads, "No, look, I think this whole issue with General Flynn is an American war hero, put together one of the greatest military machines in our history, providing the intelligence to basically eliminate Al-Qaeda from Iraq, where it wasn't. And he was the National Security Advisor designee. He was taking multiple calls a day from ambassadors, from foreign leaders. And look, I know this because the foreign leaders were contacting me, trying to get in touch with the transition team and folks that wanted to meet with President Trump, or President-elect Trump, and Vice President-elect Pence. Nunes could not rescue Flynn from disgrace, or later, Special Counsel Robert Mueller, with whom the former National Security Advisor negotiated a guilty plea on a charge of lying to the FBI. But Nunes' efforts to distract attention from Russiagate didn't cease with Flynn's departure from the administration a year ago, and even his now famous midnight run to the White House weeks later indirectly involved Flynn, according to multiple reports. Ezra Cohen-Watnick, whom Flynn had put in charge of intelligence matters on the White House National Security Council, despite his scant, low-level experience at the DIA, helped provide Nunes with classified documents that the congressman claimed to show, falsely, as it turns out, that Obama had, quote, wiretapped Trump Tower, unquote. That stunt prompted complaints from good government groups that Nunes had improperly obtained and publicized classified information. Who gave it to him? Trump did. You know that. When the House Ethics Committee opened an investigation, Nunes stepped down from his panel's slow-moving investigation into Kremlin election interference, temporarily. And on the sidelines, critics noted, Nunes was continuing his campaign to deflect questions about Team Trump's contact with the Russians, which climaxed with the memo to discredit the Justice Department and FBI probes. That was just Nunes' first step, Axios reported. The chairman is preparing as many as 5 more reports, 5 now, on politically motivated wrongdoing, as he says, at those agencies, as well as the State Department, which is not even under his purview. Longtime observers of congressional oversight called such activism on behalf of an administration unprecedented. You're supposed to be jealously guarding your own congressional prerogatives there, according to the constitutional plan. But, all right, be an executive branch defender. That won't mess things up too bad. Partisanship has waxed and waned over the years at HPSCI, depending on who held the gavel, said former senior CIA official Larry Pfeiffer. But we saw nothing compared with what we're seeing with Chairman Nunes, he told Newsweek. I don't envy our successors at Langley. We didn't call HPSCI the island of misfit toys for nothing. Nunes said David Barrett, an authority on Congress and the spy agencies, has added to the partisan rancor on the Hill instead of isolating the committee from the political wars, which it needs to gain the trust of the CIA and other intelligence agencies to admit their mistakes. When the intelligence committees become political, he told the New York Times, oversight of the intelligence agencies becomes just about impossible. And with the technology we're giving them, thanks in part to Devin Nunes and his enthusiasm for giving them spy tools when he thinks they'll be used against enemies of his, that's a bad time to make oversight impossible. None has ever been so partisan as the current HPSCI chair, Locke Johnson. It's a real name. A leading intelligence historian at the University of Georgia told Newsweek. Worse yet, Mr. Nunes has become Capitol Hill's cheerleader-in-chief for the Trump administration on anything dealing with intelligence. But is there a point when such partisanship moves beyond cheerleading into obstruction of justice? Nothing prevents the feds from looking into it, says Edward J. Loya, a former prosecutor in the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section. The DOJ and FBI can initiate an obstruction of justice charge against anyone, including Congressman Nunes, he told Newsweek. But it would be highly inappropriate for Special Counsel Mueller to conduct an obstruction investigation about whether Nunes is obstructing Mueller's own investigation. The more appropriate course, said Loya, now in private practice with Epstein, Becker, Green in Washington, would be for the DOJ to appoint a different special counsel to review this matter. Nunes would no doubt denounce such a move as political, and he might get some traction with the charge, considering that more than 7 out of 10 Republicans polled after his memo's release said they believe that members of the FBI and Justice Department are working to delegitimize Trump through politically motivated investigations. Back in the Central Valley, Jans says he's ready to combat Nunes on Russiagate if he gets the nomination. After all, he says, some of the Trump administration's own officials have been saying that the Russians are already meddling in this fall's elections. He plans to pound Nunes on why he's not focusing on that instead of undermining federal probes into Kremlin subversion. The best we can do is speak factually about what's going on, he said. All Americans should be alarmed. People in this district are asking why Nunes is going to such great lengths to cover for Trump. There must be some motivation behind what he's doing. Maybe we'll uncover it one day, maybe not. But an interesting connection to Flynn, the disgraced former national security advisor and notorious spy, and always worth putting on the record. Let's see, a couple of other interesting things on the record. I will just include in the roundup today the Axios report previously noted up at the top of the show, in which Trump is said to be privately convinced of the truth of the charges against Porter, but for some reason has decided to publicly defend him instead. I can make neither heads nor tails of what they thought, like what did they think they were doing with this. Axios is usually a relatively quick read, but I'll just give you a flavor of this anyway. President Trump is defending Porter even though privately he says he's guilty. Behind closed doors, the president has told multiple people that he believes the accusations about Porter and finds him, quote, sick. 4 sources who have spoken directly with Trump tell me his private comments about ex-aide Porter, whose 2 ex-wives accused him of violent attacks, have been brutal. But his public comments don't reflect that at all. You would have, of course, seen those comments. Behind the scenes, Porter appears to have crossed Trump's red line. In the Oval Office, Trump read a printout of the Daily Mail story with incredulity. That explains a lot. Even he's reading the Daily Mail. Oh, Parlio, I'm so sorry for you guys. He quickly turned on Porter. It's amazing that he couldn't. I mean, you would think that he's such a mercurial guy. And again, it is pointed out, was it Michael Musson who said this? Yeah, it's pointless to try to derive Trump's personal belief about Porter. His statements are always a reflection of the last person that spoke to him, or I guess the last tabloid he read. That could be it, too. All right, well, there's not that much more to the story. We get the flavor of it. It's floating out there. I don't know how much credence I put in it. I don't know whether it matters one way or another. For whatever reason, he decided to shoot himself in both feet on this issue, and then have it leak behind the scenes that he was supposedly, on the right side maybe every time. I don't know. But again, I suppose if he believes he's sick and then doesn't fire him, I don't know how we're supposed to take that. But it certainly smacks of, Jared and Ivanka are privately appalled stories. Like they thought, let's float that out there and play both sides. And, some people will believe it. And if they don't, well, we're no worse off than we were before. Let's see. Another story circulating that I will tell you by way of tweet rather than reading the lengthy story in which it appears. Kyle Griffin, who always likes to find the good nuggets in these long read stories. The long read story here being a Washington Post piece entitled 10 Key Questions About the Ethical Issues Surrounding President Trump's Company. Should make for a good read. It's a David Farenthold story, at least in part. Jonathan O'Connell joining him on the byline. Key part here that Kyle pulls out. Trump promised he would donate his presidential salary. Remember, he was going to donate to charity. But in 2 cases, the government programs he donated to don't seem to exist, the Washington Post reports, at least not yet. Or rather, the government programs he donated to help. We're not really sure what that is about, except that people were LOLing because one of the funds to which he donated was called the Human Fund, which once again just seems like one of Oliver Willis's Matrix glitches more than anything else. But I took a quick look at the article, and it's a rather lengthy read, and my initial scan didn't turn up that part about the donations. I'm sure it's buried in there. I just thought that's what grabbed my attention. I thought I'd share the tweet with you. I'll give it to you in the roundup, along with links, of course, to the full article. Just by way of warning, I don't think we're really at the point where we can spend the time parsing through this thread, but very often these things turn out to be good early warning signs when we get tweets from Wouter Vanderhorst about the vast conspiracy, the web of conspiracy behind Trump and Trump Russia. And this time the alarm bells are about his previous connections to arms dealers, including Adnan Khashoggi, and a connection now to mobbed up sports world, which comes up from time to time, through Donald Sterling, who is somehow connected into all this. I just want to throw those names out. I'm going to continue to examine the thread and see whether that's something we can really spend time on credibly and parse a real story out of, and does it all hold up? But little red flag there, particularly with the Olympics on in the background, for us to keep an eye on that stuff. Let's see. Politico with an entry and a good reminder about the nature of the Rob Porter issue. Rob Porter is a national security scandal too. William J. Antholis, Anthony, like Antholis, Antholis. I don't know how he pronounces it, puts this forth, and quite true. A morally compromised White House staffer may have had access, he did, to America's top secrets. Chief of Staff John Kelly has some explaining to do, and that's what the weekend pressure on Kelly was all about. Long story short, of course, on that one, a guy who was eminently blackmailable by a party that's said to have been interested in digging for blackmail material on Trump and or everyone who surrounded him, served for the longest time in a position where he had access to the most sensitive secret documents the country has, and yet, of course, could not make his own security clearance. There's lots of issues swirling around that, and this morning, the reporting is that something between 30 and 40 White House officials who are in need of security clearances do not yet have them. So, pretty amazing. Oh, by the way, a little note here along with those new notes about donors joining up by the ones. As it happens, thank you, everybody, joining up at Patreon. But a note that those Turkish Suleiman soap operas are, in fact, very popular throughout Latin America and have been for years, dubbed into Spanish on the big networks. I have even tried to see if I could brush up my high school and limited college Spanish and watch them in Spanish because they're available in Spanish, just not with English translations. But I just haven't caught up on that stuff. Plus some other programming notes here as well that we can share with you. But perhaps on another day, as we're getting closer to the end of today's show. So yeah, I figured those things would be big in Spanish. Particularly, I think the ones on Suleiman, because of course, it looks a lot like like the Spanish language channel soap operas here. You know, there's a harem involved in these things, and that's going to make for good television eye candy, and it's compelling enough storyline. I don't know whether the Ertugrul story is drawing as many viewers, but it's been very entertaining, and I've learned a lot that's probably false or mythological about Turkish history, but sometimes that's as important as anything. Learn the myths of the culture you're interested in. That's probably at least as important as the actual history, since it's what people in those cultures are learning and acting on. All right, let's see. Washington Post has a headline I had to grab. Hope Hicks. Why? How does she do it? Hope Hicks, the quiet one in Trump's White House, suddenly feels the glare. And that, too, makes for very interesting reading. Not enough time to get through it today, but our audience, of course, appreciates the Hope Hicks references, and it's been a good time for Hope Hicks news over the last couple of days. The New Yorker had a great entry into the John Kelly weekend, bringing up some very good points. Amy Davidson Sorkin with a question in her headline here. What did John Kelly see in Rob Porter? And again, without getting into the entirety of the article, long story short on this one is, remember, of course, that John Kelly had such insupportable things to say about Frederica Wilson and her performance, allegedly, or his view of her performance at the opening of, was it the FBI building down in Florida, where she gave a perfectly good, in fact, quite frankly, not, very good speech, paying tribute to the two agents who had been killed and for whom the building had been named, and for her partners in securing some federal funding for it. A very gracious speech that, for whatever reason, John Kelly insisted on recalling as highly partisan and inappropriate, shockingly so, because Donald Trump was in a fight with Congresswoman Wilson over, of course, his phone call to the widow of one of the soldiers killed in, where was it? Okay, was it in Nigeria or next door in Niger? I can't recall now exactly where it happened. But the important part of the story, in fact, of course, that he was in a battle with Frederica Wilson because she was defending Maisha Johnson, whose husband had been killed. And so therefore, she had to be a liar. So anybody who would defend her was a liar. And I'll come up with an example of a historical example of what a terrible person she really is. So he decides to misremember this speech. And in that context, it's now kind of weird to think of, John Kelly tends to take some very contrarian views of what everybody else is seeing out there. Normally people look at a wife beater and say, that is a sick puppy. We don't like that person, rather than defending them as a person of honor and integrity. Or apparently he was caught out also as a character witness for a Marine on trial for one crime or another, who he gave a character witness statement for, and who later went on to get picked up for child endangerment of some kind. I don't have that article right in front of me, but he tends to find himself on the wrong side of these issues fairly frequently. What is it that he saw in Rob Porter that caused him to, A, bring him on in that capacity, and B, defend him even in the face of credible allegations that he had done this horrible thing and had done it several times? But just basically a good reminder that John Kelly will lie his ass off to smear you if you find yourself on the wrong side of him over even the most trivial of issues. And that's not the adult in the room, and he doesn't belong there any longer. So I'll include that in our roundup as well. And let's see. One or two other things we need to spend some time on tomorrow, perhaps. The Intercept's work on another angle in the Trump-Russia story, and a weird one at that. We'll save that for tomorrow. You probably know what I'm talking about, or if not, I'll tease you with it. U.S. secretly negotiated with Russians to buy stolen NSA documents. What could that be about? That is pretty unusual entry for the Intercept, so we'll take I can't take a brief look at anything in the Intercept. You know, it's the Intercept. But got a few minutes left here. Let me throw this one out to you. Dana Milbank, not often a source that I go to willingly, but in the Washington Post, had a very interesting piece Friday, I guess. We didn't pick up on it because it didn't come out until 7:21 p.m. after the show was over. But this is a great headline and a story worth paying attention to. Trump concocted a story about a border agent's death. The truth won't catch up, unless, of course, we read some of this. This is the autopsy of a lie, the piece begins. On the night of November 18th, Border Patrol agent Rogelio Martinez was found dying on the side of an interstate in West Texas. There were immediate signs it had been an accident. Martinez's partner, Stephen Garland, who suffered a head injury and doesn't recall the incident, had radioed for help, saying he thought he ran into a culvert. In other words, a one-car accident. But President Trump and his allies saw an opportunity to whip up anti-immigrant fervor. At a cabinet meeting on November 20th, Trump announced, with cameras rolling, that, quote, "We lost a Border Patrol officer just yesterday, and another one was brutally beaten and badly hurt. We're going to have the wall." He also issued a similar tweet. He's not alone. Of course, Texas Governor Greg Abbott also offered a reward to help solve this murder and to help us catch this killer. Ted Cruz declared the incident a stark reminder of the ongoing threat that an unsecure border poses. And then there was Fox News reporting that, quote, "a Border Patrol agent was brutally murdered." And going with the headline, Border Patrol agent appeared to be ambushed by illegal immigrants, bashed with rocks before death. Fox News host Tucker Carlson reported that Martinez was, quote, "attacked at the border in the most gruesome possible way." Mind you, this is all about something that appears to be turning out to be a one-car accident. We ran into a culvert and got killed. But screw it. Fox News and the president and everybody else in between is going with, we lost some officers. They were killed. They were murdered. They were attacked by immigrants. They were beaten with rocks in the most gruesome possible way. Look what they're adding along the way in all this. Amazing. The FBI, the article continues, swung into action, mobilizing 37 field offices at, I'm sure, considerable expense. But we don't care about budgets anymore. And this last week, it announced its findings. Although the investigation has not conclusively determined what happened, none of the more than 650 interviews completed, locations searched, or evidence collected and analyzed have produced evidence that would support the existence of a scuffle, an altercation, or an attack on November 18th, 2017. Now, compared with the original allegations, the findings got little attention. There was no corrective tweet from Trump or the others, and no retraction by Fox News, which buried the FBI findings with a brief mention. Fox News, which had previously reported immigrants to be guilty of rape allegations that were later dropped, continued to report the border union's claim of assault, despite FBI finding no scuffle. Oh, it's all fake news. They're covering up the brutal murder, the most brutal possible murder of our border agents. Imagine that this is going on and that nobody's paying any attention to it. Well, you don't have to imagine, because it is going on and nobody's paying attention. Oh, we're paying attention to it. Dana Milbank even is paying attention to it, and we don't think that he's any kind of spectacular reporter. But okay, it's out there, and I'm glad he's given some attention to it. It is really rather amazing. And I don't know if you even need to know what else is in the rest of the article, although it's well worth reading and takes a couple of side trips into some other important issues. But, I mean, there you have it. It eventually gets to Border Patrol agent appeared to be ambushed by illegal immigrants. They knew who ambushed him, even. He wasn't ambushed, but we know who ambushed him, and we know exactly what they did. They beat him with rocks. Imagine what they're making up. It's a car accident. And they're getting away with it. The guy's still president of the United States, allegedly, and I don't know. It seems like, feels like there's less and less you can be doing about it every day. All right. Don't get too depressed. It's time to hand the microphones over to Justice Putnam, and he'll cover all the other stories that I missed by concentrating on Devin Nunes, the crazy Devin Nunes, on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What do we got? Mike Pence's brainless non-diplomacy in Korea was on full Olympic display. Wow, that was tougher than I thought. What about this? 11 government employees quit after the election of the first woman mayor in the fundamentalist Mormon city of Hilldale, Utah. That doesn't seem like it was warranted at all. If you didn't hear about it on this show, you need the Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Hey, this is West Coast 2. Ron Wyden has officially requested that the Treasury Department hand over records of Trump's $100 million deal with Russian oligarch Dmitry Rybolovlev, the guy who bought his mansion down in Florida. And the Trump Inaugural Committee still can't account for $107 million in donations. You know I told you about that. That's all coming up next.